The wind cut through the dry cornfield. The husks slapped against one another. A continuous sound, almost like a whispered warning. That old man looked down at his calloused hands as the sun dipped below the horizon. Bento was 70 years old. Sweat mixed with red dust trickled down his forehead, knowing this could be his very last night on the family farm. The earth was parched. The accumulated debts with the bank suffocated his chest. Every single acre of that property carried the blood and sweat of 3 generations. Now, only 30 days remained before the public auction. Everything seemed lost. The silence of the night was broken only by the muffled crying of a man who did not know how to start over the next day. Many believe that a man's destiny is shaped solely by his hard work. But the true answer to the salvation of that land lay buried beneath 5 spans of dry earth, in a place he swore he would never open again. Bento walked toward the porch of warped wooden planks. His steps were slow and heavy. He sat down in the old wicker rocking chair. The creaking of the wood seemed to count down the seconds of the time he had left. Beside him, lying on the cold, packed dirt, was the Old One. A mixed-breed dog, his black coat salted white by time. The animal didn't bark. He didn't chase the birds. He just stared fixedly at the top of the hill where the old abandoned cabin at the back of the property resisted time. That structure was not just a storage unit for junk left behind by his grandfather. It was a vault. What kept that dog so bound to that specific spot? Bento remembered his father's warnings. Never dig near Diogo's cabin. Never question the boundaries of that hill. The bank didn't just want the accumulated interest money. They wanted the soil itself. The local branch manager had visited the farm 3 times that week. He wasn't offering deals. He was offering total surrender. Bento looked up at the starry night sky of the countryside. The fog was beginning to descend over the dry cornfield. The cold seeped through the cracks of his worn denim shirt. The loneliness of a man with no heirs and no safety net weighed more than the sacks of grain he had carried his entire life. The Old One let out a low whimpering groan. An almost human sound of lamentation. Something was changing in the air of that freezing night. The silence of the countryside hides terrible secrets. Bento knew that every inch of that farm had a hidden history, but poverty had made him forget the past. The collection letters piled on the kitchen table were witnesses to his imminent defeat. The tractor lay broken in the shed. The irrigation pipes were bone dry and cracked by the merciless August sun. If he lost this land, where would a 70-year-old man go with spent hands and a tired body? The Old One suddenly raised his head. His ears curved forward. He growled softly into the dark. The mystery that was about to unfold would leave no time for mourning. Midnight arrived with a dense, gray fog. Bento woke with a start to an insistent sound coming from outside. It wasn't the wind. It was a continuous, rhythmic scratching coming straight from the middle of the cornfield. He lit the old kerosene lamp with a trembling match. The yellowish flame flickered slightly, casting long, misshapen shadows on the bare wooden walls of the house. Bento stepped out onto the packed dirt yard. The Old One was not in his usual spot under the porch. The man followed the disturbing noise. The dim light of the lamp sliced through the thick darkness, revealing the dry corn stalks that looked like extended claws in the dark. His feet sank into the fine dust of the drought. The sound of nails scraping against something solid came exactly from the base of the old iron flagpole where the farm's flag used to fly. There lay the dog. His front paws were digging into the earth with a frightening fury that Bento had never seen before in the gentle animal. The dog's nails were already bleeding slightly against the hard, pebble-strewn earth. Bento approached carefully, raising the lamp above his head. "Stop, Old One. You're going to hurt yourself like that," he ordered, his voice hoarse and trembling. The dog stopped instantly. He turned his head slowly and looked at his owner, his eyes shining intensely under the yellow light of the lamp. Then, he barked a single time, a sharp, piercing sound that echoed through the entire lowland of the farm and seemed to awaken the ghosts of the past. Bento lowered the lamp to ground level. At the bottom of the small hole dug by the animal, something metallic gleamed dully. It was not a common quartz stone. The man knelt with difficulty in the dirt. The chronic pain in his left knee protested intensely at the impact. He pushed away the loose soil with his own calloused hands. His fingers brushed against a cold, cylindrical, and rough surface. It was a heavy metal capsule, an old brass military tube used by the Army for field communications in the last century. The object was hermetically sealed with a thick layer of red wax, worn and cracked by time. Bento's heart raced dangerously in his chest. His hands shook visibly as he held the heavy, cold tube. The old one sat beside him in the dust, panting heavily, tongue out, his eyes locked onto the object. He seemed to have fulfilled an ancestral mission of guardianship. Bento tried to twist the brass cap right there in the darkness. The ancient metal was completely jammed by decades of rust from being buried. Who would have buried that there with such care? What did that tube contain that was so valuable or dangerous that it justified the animal's generational obsession? The invisible danger of bankruptcy and the shame of the auction seemed distant now, replaced by an ancient mystery pulsing in his trembling hands. Bento knew that opening this would change everything forever, but he could not imagine the sheer depth of the abyss of secrets he was about to uncover in the heart of his own property. He walked back to the house with quick steps, under the watchful and protective gaze of the dog. The kitchen light flickered slightly due to the old wiring. Bento placed the tube on the rustic wooden table. The red wax sealing the cap bore a symbol almost erased by time, an old coat of arms that he could not immediately recognize. Could it be related to the revolution? Was it a family secret his father had taken to the grave? He grabbed a kitchen knife and began to scrape away the hard wax. The sound of the blade against the metal was the only noise in the silent house. The old one lay down near the entrance door, eyes wide open, guarding the outside as if fearing someone would come to claim the object. The night felt eternal. Bento forced the cap with all the strength left in his tired arms. The brass groaned, releasing a greenish powder of verdigris. He knew time was running against him. If that capsule contained nothing but worthless old papers, he would be doomed to sign away the farm in the coming weeks. But the animal's behavior did not lie. There was something deeply wrong and profoundly valuable hidden beneath the roots of that dry cornfield. Bento delivered one last firm strike to the edge of the tube. The cap began to yield millimeter by millimeter. The secret was about to surface in the loneliness of that abandoned kitchen. The next morning brought a gray, cold, and lifeless light that could barely warm the house. Bento spent the first hours of the day at the wooden workbench of his mechanical workshop in the back of the shed. Using penetrating oil and an industrial screwdriver to force the brass tube's cap, he worked without pause. When the metal finally gave way with a sharp, dry snap that echoed through the empty shed, a strong odor of musty paper, dampness, and old gunpowder flooded the confined air. From inside the tube, with extreme care not to tear the parched material, he pulled out a map drawn by hand on yellowed paper and a small diary with a faded, worn cowhide cover. The diary originally belonged to Diogo, his paternal grandfather. The handwriting was ornate, firm, and written with a thick-stroked black fountain pen. Bento began to read the accounts, his eyes narrowing from the lack of light. The words revealed a hidden military history that the family itself had tried to erase from local memory out of pure fear of government retaliation. The farm had not been bought with ordinary harvest money. In 1932, during the Constitutionalist Revolution, the isolated property had served as a strategic refuge and secret supply point for retreating troops. Bento turned to the leather pages with an almost religious care. The paper was so fragile it felt as though it would crumble into flakes at the slightest rough touch. The handwritten text detailed a lost cargo of high strategic value, a large crate of confidential supplies from the provisional government that never reached its official destination due to the siege by federal troops. His grandfather had written on the very last page in his own hand, "The gold of the coalition is safe, where the eye of the earth does not blink. The watchdog knows the exact path to salvation, but the earth demands eternal silence from whoever finds it." Bento furrowed his brow in confusion. It sounded like the madness of an old man or a romantic legend from wartime. But the obsessive behavior of the old one, the farm's current dog, suggested something very different and frighteningly real. The animals of that specific lineage were always born and died within the boundaries of the farm. The old one was a direct great-great-grandson of Diogo's first guard dog. Could it be biologically possible that the instinct to track that exact excavation point had been passed down from generation to generation like a silent genetic command? To seek concrete historical and legal answers to this madness, Bento tucked the documents into his jacket, grabbed his loud, aging pickup truck, and drove to the real estate registry office in the neighboring town. The public building was an old 19th century construction with a heavy smell of mold, old papers, and gray steel filing cabinets that screeched loudly every time a drawer was opened. Dr. Arnaldo, the head archivist of the registry office, examined the old map brought by Bento with a large brass magnifying glass. He looked long and hard at the farmer over the thick lenses of his glasses, clearing his throat before speaking. Bento, these 1932 military records are extremely complicated and dangerous. Your current farm belonged to an area of undeclared military expropriation on the civil maps of the time. If your grandfather found anything of value during that time of chaos, legally under current laws, it was never his property. But there is a marginal note here in this official registry book that catches my attention. A complete inventory of confiscated goods that mysteriously vanished from the Central Archive on the exact day the Peace and Amnesty Treaty was signed by the remaining forces. Bento swallowed hard, his mouth feeling as dry as the cornfield. The lead was real. The mystery was no simple legend to scare children on cold nights. It was a state secret buried in the backyard of his own home. The imminent danger of losing the farm to the bank auction now mingled with the paralyzing fear of unearthing what should have been forgotten forever in the mists of history. Bento thanked the archivist with a nod and left the office. The old farmer's mind was working at high speed. Dr. Arnaldo had confirmed that the area had been targeted since the end of the revolution. There were powerful forces moving pieces on the chessboard of that small town. He got into the truck and slammed the door hard. The diesel engine coughed before starting. On the way back to the farm, he noticed a black car with dark windows parked at the exit of the town. The vehicle began to follow him at a distance along the dirt road. The danger was no longer a theoretical assumption. The mystery was drawing the attention of people who preferred to keep the past locked away under lock and key. He accelerated the old vehicle, kicking up a curtain of dust to throw off his pursuers. He needed to reach the farm before it was too late. Bento returned to the farm when the sun had completely hidden behind the dark mountains, leaving the property in twilight. The old one was anxiously waiting for him at the entrance of the hill trail near Diogo's abandoned cabin. The man climbed down from the truck, his muscles locked up, firmly holding a sharp spade and a forged iron pickaxe. He methodically followed the geometric markings on his grandfather's map, which he had brought in his pocket. The coordinates of the drawing intersected exactly with the soapstone structural foundation of the old wooden cabin. The dog began to whine softly, a sharp sound of nervous anticipation that made the hairs on the farmer's neck stand up. Bento stepped into the ruined cabin. The collapsed roof in several places revealed the first stars of the cold night. The floor consisted of thick planks of genuine IP wood, darkened by time, mold, and the accumulated grime of decades of neglect. He began to break the floor with violent blows of the pickaxe. The hard hardwood resisted bravely, throwing off heavy splinters that flew into the dark of the cabin. After 2 long hours of uninterrupted and heavy physical labor, Bento's arms burned with pure exhaustion, and sweat poured into his eyes. The pickaxe finally struck something that was neither foundation stone nor floorwood. A metallic, hollow, and deep sound echoed throughout the empty cabin. Bento cleared away the debris and black dirt with his own bare hands, oblivious to the cuts on his palms. A large cast iron plate bearing the embossed coat of arms of the old oligarchic republic was revealed there. It was not a simple wooden crate buried in the haste of war. It was the fortified ceiling of a complete underground military bunker. With great physical effort, using a thick iron bar as an improvised lever, Bento lifted the heavy iron hatch. A gust of confined, icy air smelling of chemical decay hit his wrinkled face directly. He descended the narrow soapstone steps with the kerosene lamp in his right hand. The old one followed him step by step without hesitating for a single second. Down there, in the enclosed space, the light from the lamp revealed what Bento was absolutely certain would be the financial treasure in coins or gold bars to save his life from imminent bankruptcy. But what he saw in that basement froze his blood immediately. There were no shiny gold bars or crown jewels. There were only completely empty ammunition crates, rotted by dampness. In the exact center of the concrete room sat a steel desk holding dozens of folders of official documents, stamped and dated from only 30 years ago. Bento approached the desk with trembling legs and began to flip through the pages of letterhead from the very same private bank that was enforcing his current unpayable debt. The grand revelation hit the old farmer like a violent punch to the stomach. The private bank was not trying to seize his farm because of recent agricultural failures or harvest debts. The current bank was directly owned by the direct descendants of the federal general who had lost the strategic military cargo in that same area in 1932. They knew perfectly well about the secret of the bunker through wartime diaries from the opposing faction. The fictitious rural debts and recurring abusive interest rates were deliberately engineered by the bank's board over the last 3 decades to legally force Bento's family to abandon the land through bankruptcy, without the financial institution needing to conduct public excavations that would draw the federal government's attention to the bunker. Bento's financial ruin was not bad luck or incompetence in the fields. It was a macabre plan of family vengeance and historical greed, executed in absolute corporate silence for more than 30 years. Bento felt tears of rage stream down his sun-furrowed cheeks. He gripped the papers so tightly that the corners tore. The bank had set contractual traps in every loan his father and he had signed. They controlled the price of supplies at the local cooperative. They bribed the agricultural experts who evaluated the land's productivity. It all made sense now. The crop failure 5 years ago, which had started the snowball of debt, had been caused by a batch of adulterated seeds that the bank branch had forced him to buy as collateral for the loan. They wanted to suffocate him until he handed over the keys to the farm of his own free will. The old one approached the iron desk and placed his front paw on one of the smaller dark blue folders. There was one more secret kept in that concrete room. A legal detail that the bank's senior lawyers hoped Bento would die without ever discovering. The truth lay exposed on those yellowed archive sheets. Bento's supposed millionaire debt was a legalized legal fraud, coldly assembled to steal the legitimate legacy of his grandfather Diogo. At the back of the last dark blue folder, Bento found an original document that the bank's senior lawyers tried to hide at all costs. An international war insurance policy, issued in the name of the rural property by foreign insurers in 1935. This document stipulated that the dividends and war indemnities accumulated extraordinary compound interest in favor of the direct heirs, provided the land was maintained and defended by the same family lineage for more than 3 consecutive generations without prior sale. The financial value of that updated historic policy not only easily paid off the bank's fraudulent debt, but made the historic farm completely self-sufficient and wealthy for the next 100 years of history. The bank's board of directors knew this perfectly well. They needed to tear Bento away from there before the policy's 60-year statute of limitations expired completely. And that legal deadline expired exactly the next day, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Bento climbed the stone steps of the bunker, his spine straighter than it had been in the last 20 years. The morning sun began to rise on the countryside horizon, painting the once gray sky a vivid, intense gold and pink. The strong wind blowing through the cornfield now sounded like an epic song of ancestral victory, no longer a whisper warning of ruin. He looked with deep gratitude at the old one. The dog lay down calmly on the planks of the main house's porch, closing his tired eyes for a well-deserved and final rest. The guard mission of his biological lineage was finally fulfilled after nearly a century of silent vigil. The next day, at the final hour of the deadline, Bento walked into the courtroom of the local district accompanied by a federal prosecutor whom he had summoned that very night with the undeniable evidence extracted from the underground bunker. The bank's legal representatives, upon seeing the original historical documents and the signed war policy, turned pale and immediately withdrew all collection lawsuits. The judicial execution of the debt was annulled by the judge on duty with irrevocable status. The historic farm was definitively saved and free from any corporate threat. You who are watching this emotional journey to the end here on the channel, look closely at your own daily battles in your personal or professional life. Sometimes, the crushing weight you carry today on your shoulders, the financial or emotional crisis that seems completely unfair, cruel, and without any apparent way out, is by no means a sign that you have failed as a human being or that you have been abandoned in the desert. It may just be the invisible reflection of hidden forces or past trials that you do not yet fully understand. trying in every way to make you give up and abandon what is yours by sacred right of inheritance. The unwavering persistence of old Bento and the protective instinct of that lonely dog clearly show us that truth and divine justice have a very specific and perfect time to flourish in the soil of the earth. Do not abandon your land of labor. Do not give up on your cornfield in the middle of the drought. What today seems to be your ultimate ruin may just be the sacred ground that hides your greatest liberation and your greatest wealth for the future. Hold fast on your journey. Your day of harvest and victory will come faster than you imagine. Like the video, subscribe to the channel for more impactful real stories like this one, and until the next journey.